Many people struggle with the idea of Jesus turning water into wine. You've probably heard preachers and other people trying to explain it away, saying that they made wine a little bit different back in those days. They would put it in these wine skins and it'd be 3 parts water to 1 part wine. Or they would claim that it was just basically grape juice that had kind of fermented, so it was almost like a hard cider or something, anything to make them feel or justify in their minds that the miracle Jesus did not include wine. But if you actually read chapter 2 of John, that argument falls apart because verse 10 explicitly tells us this wasn't just wine, it was actually fine wine, the very best. So why did Jesus choose a wedding party to perform his first miracle or reveal his first glory? And then why did he choose this specific miracle out of all the miracles that he could have done? But I think you'll see today it wasn't just to keep the party going, but rather a pretty radical statement about things like life, death, and religion. So to understand this miracle, we first have to understand the first century Jewish cultures and traditions surrounding a Jewish wedding and the Jewish wedding feast. In Jesus' time, a wedding wasn't just a ceremony and a reception dinner like it is today. It was a massive community event that would last days, if not weeks. After a long betrothal period or an engagement period, a feast would take place. And there's lots of examples in the Bible about this wedding feast that would take place. So we get many snapshots from Jesus and his teachings about the wedding and the wedding ceremony and the wedding feast. And from what we gather, a good wedding would last at least 7 days. And this was the family's way of showing hospitality. It was showing that they were part of the community. And it was something that bonded the whole community or the entire community together, especially around this new family, this new couple. But logistically, this was a nightmare. People would come and go. There was no RSVP. They would come and stay, and you didn't know how many people would show up, so you didn't know how much food to order. And of course, they probably didn't have catering services with refrigerators and generators, so it was just difficult. It was a lot of hard work. And this is where the drama starts. The bride and groom started running out of wine. In fact, when Jesus shows up, they were out of wine. But this wasn't just a party foul. This wasn't just something that affected This wasn't just something that affected their party. This was something that would affect negatively their whole life. In that culture, it would bring deep shame for them not to be prepared and not to serve the community like this. If they ran out, the family would face disgrace, the whole family, talking about the parents, etc. And the marriage, unfortunately, might effectively be over before it even got started. So it would bring death to that family. Now, we can assume that Jesus' mother, Mary, was somehow connected to this family, was close to this family. Whether she was a relation, an aunt, or whatever, we don't know for sure. But we know that she had to have been close to this family because she gets involved. She comes to Jesus with the bad news saying they have no wine. Now, Jesus would have understood this, and Mary absolutely understood what it would cause to this family and the reaction of the community. Now, Jesus' reaction to his mom sounds kind of harsh to our modern ears. I think if I would have ever called my mom woman, that would probably have been the last time that would have ever happened. But he says to his mom, "Woman, why does this concern us? My hour has not yet come." But interesting, she doesn't rebuke him. She doesn't even argue. She just turns to the servants and says, "Do what he tells you to do." And then she goes off like it's already a done deal, like it's already taken care of. So Jesus didn't just conjure up wine out of nothing, and he probably could have, but he points to these stone jars that were sitting nearby, probably at the entrance. Jesus probably interacts with his mother walking into this Jewish home's courtyard, and there near the entrance, near the start of the party, would have been these jars for the Jewish folks to ritually clean themselves. These were jars that, as the Bible says, were for the Jewish ritual of purification or the rite of purification. So Jesus tells the folks that Mary had talked to fill up the jars with water. Then he tells them to draw out some water and take it to the master servant or the master of the banquet, basically the wedding planner and the one that's doing all the logistics for this party. tells him to take it to him. The wedding planner or the master of the party, the banquet, takes it, he drinks it, he calls the bridegroom over, and he says, everyone brings out the choice wine first, then after everybody's drank too much, they bring out the cheap wine. But you have saved the best till now. So that was counterculture. It was different than what usually happened. And I think that's key to understanding our story today. So John tells us this is the first time that Jesus displayed his glory. This is a miracle or a sign, as John calls them, that caused the disciples to believe in him because they had just started following him chronologically. But why this? Why this miracle? Why this turning into wine and why at a wedding feast? Well, I believe there's three possible reasons as to why. Number one, Jesus cares. Jesus had compassion on this young couple. Regardless of whether he knew them or not, we believe that he probably did, but he knew the shame, the sorrow, social stigma, the embarrassment that they were about to face. He didn't lecture them on poor planning. He showed them grace. And I think this shows that God cares about the things that stress us out too, even if it's social things. And I think that because it was a wedding feast, and there's so much allegory and metaphor around wedding feasts in the Bible, I think it's very important that he chose a party to show his glory and his grace. Because I think Jesus likes to party. Number two, it's showing that Jesus brings dead things to life. You're saying, wait, this was a wedding, not a funeral. So what did he bring to life? Well, I think there's two dead things in this story. The first was that the family's reputation, their marriage, was metaphorically dead. They were hopeless. Without more wine, they would have been run out of town probably. Second, those stone jars are important. I think some of the things that John tells us about those stone jars are important as well. So notice that Jesus tells the servants to fill them up. He didn't tell them to empty the water that was there. He told them to fill them up because they were already empty. Now, you could argue that it was because they had so many guests that they had ran out of water. But what if those jars were sitting in the corner dusty and empty because they weren't used? The Jewish people there had just forgot or stopped using that part of their religion, that part of their ritual. And so the point is that that was a dead, empty ritual. It didn't matter to the Jewish people that they needed to ritually cleanse and perform this ritual cleansing rite. And so those jars were just sitting there waiting to be used by Jesus. But in both instances, Jesus brought abundance where there was nothing. Whether it was a marriage that was doomed, likely to fail because of the stigma and the shame, he brought abundance. The fine wine was brought out at the end. People could party. It started the family and that relationship off on a very powerfully strong and high note. But also he filled lifeless, empty jars with a new and exceptional wine. He brought life where there was death. Number three, Jesus created new wine. So this is pretty controversial. Jesus took these ritual cleansing jars, these holy vessels that were used for washing and cleansing. It would be washing the feet and hands, to fill them with wine for a party, right? To the religious leaders, that would have bordered on heresy. It would have been sacrilegious for Jesus to do this because they were a ritualistic cleaning jar for the Jewish religion, and he took them and filled them with wine to keep the party rocking. This was an in-your-face statement, and Jesus was saying the old way of relating to God, the old way of worshiping God, this external washing, this empty ritual was over. It's like he was replacing this old, dusty, relationless, void, dead religion with life and energy, with a party, with wine, with joy, and a wedding feast. So it could have been any one of those three or all combined. We don't know. But we do know that Jesus took a disaster and turned it into a display of his glory and his grace. He took ordinary water and turned it into fine wine. And maybe when we finally see Jesus face to face, he'll laugh at all these theories and say he just wanted to party. I don't know. But until then, we know that when Jesus is involved, it's the best. So may you go this week knowing that Jesus likes to party and he brings the best wine.